Welcome to the Lessons from Sports podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Partello. Each episode, I have conversations with people from in and around the world of sports. Maybe they're a coach, maybe a player, maybe somebody who worked in the front office, or just somebody who played sports as a kid. This week, talked to an old friend of mine. Bob Lynch and I started our careers as young kids working at a radio station, one cubicle away from each other. Bob was on the sales side, I was on the marketing side, and we became great friends. He's going to explain all about his career. We had a chance to work together again in Miami. But what Bob has built with Sponsor United is just incredible. It's a great lesson in working in an industry as a young person, in continuously looking for opportunities to not only improve yourself, but looking at holes in the market and seeing how you could help fill that hole. Bob saw an opportunity where there was no data tracking all of the sponsorship deals in the world of sports. His company has now grown to not just the world of sports, but now tracking all the media deals across the country and now across the world. Bob is just an incredible visionary. He's a creative, just crazy person. I love him to death. And I'm really excited for you to hear sort of how he came up with the idea, what he's done with it since, and just sort of the way he goes about his everyday. I'm really excited for you to hear this conversation with me and my old friend, Bob Lynch.
All right, we're here with my buddy, Bob Lynch. And gosh, Lynchy, what's it, 23, 24 years? How old are we now? We've been
2002.
2002. So yeah, we're 22 years. And it was about January, right? I think we started at
December 9th or December 8th.
Yeah, so we're about the same. So pretty wild. We've, started as kids at a radio station and went on to actually later work at the Miami Dolphins together and everything you've done from there. So I know your story, but better than me telling it, you want to give everybody sort of like the elevator pitch of who is Bob Lynch?
Geez, I don't know where to take that one. I played college athletics, college football, and fortunately had an opportunity to work in radio in Boston at what's now called Odyssey Entercom Communications as a sales assistant, and worked my way up into sales and business development, and did that in management. Fortunately had an opportunity to go down to New York and work for iHeartMedia and then get into management, eventually working my way into the NFL with the Miami Dolphins, which is where we then reconnected after being away for about 4 or 5 years. So distance makes the heart grow fond. Great to reconnect and join powers with you in Miami. And we did some really fun things around integrated media, go-to-market strategies on the content and business development side. And then eventually had a chance to get back to the Northeast. My wife's from Brooklyn. I'm from Connecticut. Had a chance to work with the Brooklyn Nets and BSE Global. And eventually I had been thinking about it for a very long time about how data was becoming so much more important in these business decisions that are made within sports and entertainment. And thought that if there was a way that we could kind of have all the information around the diversity of partnerships and creativity that takes place in so many different arenas and venues, that it could be quite valuable to use that to create great partnerships. And so I had sort of thought about that for a long time and eventually got up the guts to launch a company called Sponsor United that essentially tracks every sponsorship asset, standardizes everything that could be bought and sold within not just sponsorship, but really in media at this point, and then created a SaaS subscription-based platform that today about 99% of pro sports teams and leagues use, but also over 1,000 brands, media companies, agencies, all utilize our data.
Yeah, I remember you sketching this out when we were in Miami. You started thinking about it and had pencil sketches of like how it all, and then years later to see you were like taking the leap. And, as you know, I've taken the leap too, to go do our own thing. And, but yeah, you touched on a lot of stuff there, right? Like college football player, like you were how much bigger then?
I was 60, 70 pounds heavier at the time, probably.
Because we met you like you are now. which is like a tall, thin guy, and you're like brought this picture one day of I'll probably edit it in right here, but it's with the bandana and just the full on college football player.
Yeah,
Pretty
I can
wild.
be very like tunnel vision, and so for a long period of time, I wanted to play college basketball. I spent like 9 years. That's all I did was play like basketball, train like crazy, and then I realized as I got closer to high school or in high school that the path forward. My dad actually put it well. He goes, "I'm not a smart man with numbers, but there's 110 scholarships on a football team. There's 12 to 15 on a basketball team. You might have a better chance in
That's pretty
football."
funny.
So that kind of really made me shift my focus there and went all in on eating a lot, working out a lot, and just going all in on that. It was an amazing experience.
Yeah, and the football, I mean, was a big part of your family anyways, right? Your dad was, not just a high school football coach, but one of the best high school football coaches ever.
Yeah, he had a great run. He played college football in like the 1940s and 50s. No face mask. Nobody had face masks back then. So like
Wow.
almost leather helmet, 1948 to 52, and then he got into college coaching. He was an NFL scout for the Eagles back in the 50s. Went to college, high school coaching, then college, and then he met my mom and decided to kind of get out of the college game and settle down. And glad he did. I'm here.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember through the years of friendship, all of his coaching and guidance and how important that was and like how you attacked things. You said, you had this tunnel vision at times, and you do, right? Like you lock in on something like nobody I've ever seen and just attack it. I mean, I'll get messages from you at 11:30 my time and you're on the East Coast, and I'm like, what is he doing right now?
They say
You're
it's
like,
not,
I'm
it's
in the
not
zone.
work if you enjoy it. So I do love what I do. I mean, I genuinely do. I think it's fun solving these interesting problems. And yeah, I learned a lot. I inherited a lot from my father in that he was very creative. He kind of had this kind of on a spectrum of very innovative and creative. He ran a pro style offense in like 1967. His quarterback, uh, who went to Notre Dame, and his wide receiver went to Notre Dame, became an All American. He had like the high school passing record for yards in a game for like 25 years. He passed for like
Wow.
600 yards in a game in 1970, and that record stood until like 1984. So he was always like thinking ahead. He had his teams lifting weights in the late 1950s, 1958. They had a gym. Nobody did that. So I always inherited kind of like always thinking ahead, always trying to be innovative. So I love that about him. Yet he also was in the military, so he had kind of from a discipline side and kind of blending creativity and innovation with sort of discipline. So I try to take both of those components well, but I really don't consider it work. I really love what I do, so it's fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. One of my favorite like Bob Lynch calls of all time was when you were working in New York, talking about innovation and blending. I think it was New York, it could have been Boston, where you were considering getting a driver to drive you to and from work, not because you were like lazy, but because you were losing valuable time looking for leads on the way to work, that you could be more efficient. You had done the math that the cost of the driver would convert with I don't know, whatever it was, but it was the funniest, like, and the math added up. Like it was
I was
like,
gonna buy like a used Escalade or something and rip out the second row, create like a work center. And I definitely did the math on that to see like, oh, if I could get somebody to drive me and I could be working, to and from, etc. I never got the guts to pull the trigger on it, but I got close. But I remember at one point I hired this was in New York. I hired a virtual assistant in like 2005 that was like offshore. I can't remember the name of the company, but the idea was like, oh, I could like hire these assistants to do all this like grunt work for me and stuff and pay on the hourly rate. It didn't work out that well. The translation was like, it was almost
yeah.
too much work to do at the time, but yeah, I was always trying different ways to game the system, I suppose.
Well, you were ahead of the game. You were ahead of the game because when the Chargers moved from San Diego to LA, like the story was that their quarterback didn't want to move to LA. So he kept his family in San Diego and showed his coaches that he built a mobile film room. And so
Yeah.
all the time that he would have been sitting in the film room in LA, he did it on his commute so that he could get home and see his family. I was like, Bob Lynch, that's the Lynch idea.
I love that. I remember reading that story, and he was with he was with his, I think the other quarterback, the backup, also
Yeah,
did the same thing. So they would just go together in film room, and I think they had larger budgets than I was envisioning when I was
sure.
thinking about my car. I think they had one of those Mercedes Sprinters.
Yeah,
That was
but
amazing, though. It was brilliant.
it's innovation before its time, right? It's the magic of what you guys have done with Sponsor United. So, all right. So the whole basis of this project for me, and I appreciate you being here, is that I get access and have had access to amazing people my entire career. You being one of them. That we just have these amazing. I mean, look, we're supposed to start this podcast like 25 minutes ago, but you and I get on, and it's like, what are you doing? Here are we doing? And the ideas start flowing, and I like to share not only the people that I get to like interact with, which I think is just incredible, but also like their insights and their lessons, because you and I both know that sports allows some incredible life lessons. That's why everybody loves their kids to play team sports when they're younger. There's so many lessons. So what's something for you, obviously been around sports media, you were on the team side with, NFL, NBA, and now working with teams across the world. I mean, it's wild. And you've got how many employees now across the globe for Sponsor United?
Couple hundred. Yeah.
Yeah, like massive team all over the world. What's a lesson from sports that you think has really helped you find your happiness and go after it the way you have?
I do find that I mean, I literally this morning I was giving somebody an example from the sports world into thinking about hiring and staffing and how you need role players and you need your stars and how teams transition. I was thinking about UConn in 1988 because I grew up in Connecticut and they were a terrible team growing up. And then in 1988, they had these players that were like role players that came in and contributed, and they started to get some stars, and how that evolved over time where now they have all stars. And so I think there's just so many parallels to the space, related to playing sports, being around sports. I mean, you could spend all day talking about it, but I think that there's a component of one, finding something that you truly love to do. So I have kids now, and we go to these athletic centers, and sometimes you see parents pushing their kids more than their kids really want to even be there, and they develop
Yep.
kind of probably a hate for some of the things they do. And so you've got to find the thing that you absolutely love to do, passionate about. I think it's being able to interact with just diverse people from all walks of life, I think is so valuable, because everybody's wired differently. Everybody's motivated in different ways, not just in sports teams, but in companies and businesses that you work for. And there's a lot of things that are outside your control that happen. The ball bounces a certain way, and that happens in startup life. It happens in any company. There's things that are outside your control, and you have to be comfortable in dealing with those things and just being able to deal with failure and accept failure and hard work and thinking differently about how to solve problems. And so that's really important and transferable, I think, in just life in general.
Yeah, no, that's a great one. You're right. The makeup of the team, and when you look at the characters we worked with at WEEI back in the day, and how that transitioned to when we got to the NFL, the different types of characters that make up an incredible team, right? Like the coaching tree of the people we talk about this a lot, like the amount, and everybody was different. Like you and I are not the same, but we have a lot of similarities, but the way we look at, things, we come at it differently, but somehow around the backside, we got to like solutions together. I say this to you all the time, this, but like from like a sponsorship and the sales side of the business, there's nobody I worked better with in my career than you for whatever reason, right? We were attacking the same goal and understood and appreciated that, like, we were going to come at it differently, respect each other's opinion, but it forces you to be like, all right, I got to think about it differently, because how's Bob going to come at this? And when you respect the other people on your team, I think it allows you to win faster, because
Yeah.
what we were able to accomplish in our time there was crazy, because we were all new to the NFL, like trying to figure this thing out, but we're willing to make a few mistakes along the way, but all put together this team of people that were all fighting for the same goal. I think that's special.
Yeah, sports is really, working at a sports organization is really a microcosm of society, and how it's a melting pot of different personalities. And I think especially working for a team, you quickly recognize all the different ecosystems that actually make up the organization, how they have to coordinate and work together. The people that are working on the grounds and
Right.
stadium operations, and you see firsthand how that impacts what you do on a daily basis. And they're going to be wired differently than you're going to be wired. And so, how do you find those commonalities? How do you respect the boundaries of how the PR needs to work with the players, et cetera?
Mhm.
And so you learn quickly, like, just how to work amongst a group of people to achieve a common goal in a way that sometimes you don't necessarily see. Like, I worked at Fortune 500 companies. You might not see all the other aspects of the business because they're so large. You don't get
Yeah.
that exposure that I think you get in sports.
That's a great point. You're right. Now for us dropping into, with Quento, we drop into large companies and small companies, and you do see different challenges, right? The larger companies, they're not talking to each other across silos because they're so large. There's no way somebody on the grounds crew is going to ever interact with that sponsorship seller because they would, you know, I, I say all the time, excuse me, working in radio as young folks for us, I think was one of the biggest blessings of my career because small budgets allowed young people to do things way over our pay scale and interact with everybody because it was actually a pretty small company,
Yeah,
and
I always used to love the show Undercover Boss because people get exposed to um, like how the business actually operates in real life. And when you working in radio, where we did in the beginning, I had to go cold call into businesses all day and literally like walk into businesses to get a business
Mhm.
card or talk about their business. And you see the raw and real, like what's happening in this small business. Now, if I switch that over from when I worked in New York in media, you weren't sitting with a small business owner. You didn't see how everything operated. You're answering an agency RFP with cost per points that you're trying to deliver against, but you don't actually see the mechanics of why the business is working or not working, that you see sort of a working at a local radio station and learning about how the mortgage industry works versus the beer
Yep.
industry versus a car dealer. And I think that exposure, and the same thing in working at a professional sports team, you see how these other departments work. You're there, you're developing relationships with people in these other areas. You're learning so much more than not being exposed to those things and just kind of sitting in your silo.
Yeah, I think, I tell young people all the time to use your early part of your career, the 20s, to just get your feet and get exposure to as many industries, as many skills, as many everything. Just open your eyes and open because the possibilities will start to open up. Like I could never have imagined I'd be doing what I'm doing today. Like that just wasn't even in my like scope. But as I opened my eyes, like the opportunity to go work at a professional sports team started to become a real possibility. And it was like, gosh, that would be a dream come true. Like, let's go do that. And then we did it. And we're like, well, this is pretty cool. Like, we went from selling air to like selling 75,000 people on a Sunday in the NFL. Like that was a change. Like it wasn't like we weren't selling a concept. We were selling like a real tangible thing for the first time in our careers and had the ability to really put sponsors in a really unique spot. Then your eyes open to the next thing. You're like, you see, again, back to what we see as the differences of us. You see this lack of data, right? And you start to see the opportunity that it's there. And then you go to the NBA to verify if that's right. Like, wow, there is this gap. I saw a different gap and was like, I'm
Mhm.
going to go after that gap. And it's like, but if you don't open your eyes to the possibilities, you'll never know what could have been. Because if you just lock in on one career, you're like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. I think radio allowed us to see so many different industries. And I think it was an amazing kind of scene setter for a bunch of 20-year-old idiots, like we're
I'm so happy that I came from outside the industry first because I just got exposure to how business operates, how the mechanics of marketing works. You learn a lot of those things, and I think that there's value in coming with a different perspective. And I always loved I think it's a Danny Meyer quote about you want to always be collecting dots and connecting dots. And so I just feel
that's
like
good.
when you get exposed in radio, you're actually meeting with hundreds of different types of businesses, and you learn how all of them operate in different ways to achieve whatever goals they want to. And a lot of that is transferable no matter what environment you go into. So when we went into the NFL, it's like you could kind of pattern recognize different things that may be different because it's a 75,000 seat stadium, but the actual mechanics behind what's trying to be accomplished are most likely the same. And so you can start to apply different ideas and solutions from one environment into another environment. And I think that's the fun of, as you get older and you get exposed to a lot of these different companies and cultures and businesses and business problems, it allows you to take those things and apply them in new ways. That's the fun of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is wild to like see, like even like looking at you today, like we don't see each other physically all that often, but like we're like the old guys now. Like you're like, wait, we're coming with a like 25 years of experience of like different things. And you're like, wait, when did that happen? Like when did we wake up and go,
Yeah.
but we have done a lot of things, each of us different, but like you look at all of our peers and the people we've worked with, and you're going, gosh, we have been doing this a really long time. Like
Yeah,
it's
I guess so. But although, yeah, in 20 years we'll probably be like, oh man, we were so
oh yeah.
young. So it's all perspective, I suppose. But the
Yeah.
great thing about I think any business is that as you grow and go off to different things and put yourself out and continue to put yourself out there in uncomfortable positions of like a new company, a new industry that you're not familiar with versus staying in the same place, and you surround yourself by like-minded people that also want to continue to challenge themselves and grow and develop over time, is that they go off into different environments and totally different places, and then you start to have a network of people that have such unique perspectives that as you regroup with them, we were just talking before this about some of the initiatives you're doing, and that's great learning for me of like, oh, how do we think about that through our
Mhm.
lens of what we're doing in a different environment? And I think that's the value of these networks that you develop over time.
Yeah, it's one of the things I try to tell kids all the time is like the people you interact with, whether it's in high school or college, and then your first sort of tranche of your career. Uh, Mike D told me this. This was like one of his things. He was like, as you go through your career, you're just on different movies. Sometimes you might have a different movie later in life that some of the same cast gets back together, and then there's time. And he's like, if you look at it as like these chapters of movies or whatever. And I'm like, you look at the chapters that we had, and you go, wow, the people that we were with and everything that they've gone on to do. You're right, because then when we regroup, that it just starts going because there's a common trust, a common foundation of our thought processes, right? Like we all came from the same nutty professor, right?
Mhm.
Rushton. And then like, so you got this sort of, we have this commonality, and then you go, but we've all gone and done different things. But when you bring it back, like I know I get on the phone with like John Karpinski, who's been, in the iHeart world for a long time now. And he comes with a completely different perspective and ideas and challenging me because I'll run ideas by him because he's in the media space and I need to like make sure that I've been out of that game for a long time, that I'm thinking the same way, that I'm right. And it's just super powerful, the networks you can create as long, to your point, like-minded people all fighting towards the same goal, you can really, build a powerful network.
Well, I started to. It's funny you use movies as the example. I would say that at one point in my career, I felt like I was uh, in a band and I was just like different towns, same songs, and it's like, am I really learning new things at the
Right.
pace that I want to? And so I'd probably equate it to if you find yourself in a different movie, but it's kind of the same. You've been typecast, and it's
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
characters, and it's the same things. And maybe you're not challenging yourself to kind of diversify and get outside of those
Yeah.
environments. The Matthew McConaughey of like, I'm just going to totally get off the grid for a decade and only take things that are really challenging. There's a great story about that with him because he was just kept getting, he could have kept making money, kept doing well
Yeah.
and whatever, but he wanted to kind of stretch his horizons. And I think about, we all come upon points in our career where maybe we're not challenging ourselves to grow enough anymore. And we're starting to plateau the experiences and the people we surround ourselves by. And I think that's sometimes very uncomfortable, to be in your 30s or 40s in a career, and all of a sudden you're going to put yourself out there and expose yourself for the first time to failure again when you've been successful. And so you have to be probably a little bit, this is why it helps me. You got to be a little bit crazy
Hmm.
to make that leap and do something different. I'm gonna have the conviction that you're playing the long game of growth as well. Like, hey, hopefully my career doesn't end at 40 or 50 years old, but I should, how do I keep pushing?
I love that. Yeah. That, when I quit working at the Padres, right, to that point of like, it, the general perception is you've achieved it. You're there. But when you're living it, you're like, no, but this is just the next plateau. Like, what's next? Like, those who are challenging themselves. And I had this moment where I looked around and I saw people that have been doing my job for a very, very, very long time. And I was like, gosh, there's not a lot of innovation because they sat at that plateau and that was a career choice they made. But for me, I didn't want that, right? Like, I had done everything I set out to accomplish in that job. And I'm like, okay, how do I challenge myself again? You just said it so perfectly. Open myself up to risk for the first time in a long time and say, okay, we're going to do this. And it's scary, right? But am I learning? Am I challenging myself? Am I getting better by doing this job any further? And I think that's a big one for people is like, you could sit there and take that check and it's a great job, right? Like, and it's a job when working for a sports team can start to become, even the radio station, part of your personality. It starts to attach that logo to you, right? And you become, you know, you you were Bobby from Z100, right? Oh, it's Bob from Z100, Bob, right? And then it was like, oh, it's Bob from the Dolphins, Bob from the Dolphins. And then you fast forward, you're like, well, okay, that's great. But now I want to be known as a creator or, an entrepreneur. And I want to be a thought leader in this data analytics space. 2 years later, you were, right? Like in people, the perception wasn't this sports executive anymore. You risked it a lot and went after it. And then all of a sudden you challenge yourself to be in a new arena and thriving in that arena. It's unbelievable to watch, dude. It's really fun to like look up on LinkedIn and see you speaking at all these like teams about all the stuff that you were so passionate about that not everybody was paying attention to 10, 15 years ago, that now is like the basis of a ton of decisions being made in the game.
Well, it's like grow or die, right? I mean, if you're not evolving, then you're going to die. And I think of, if you look at sports on the team side, if you're on a team, I mean, if you're not continuing to improve, you're eventually going to be out of a job. There's going to be
That's
others
it.
that come along. There's this competition in life and sports. It's like, you think, and you have to really respect how the Tom Brady's and LeBron James of the world invest in their continued development to maintain the
Mhm.
highest quality of performance for the longest period of time. Their diets, like everything matters at that point. And so I think that's an important thing of like, if you're not continuing to challenge yourself and develop yourself, I don't care what age you are, eventually you're going to be replaceable.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the name. I love that. You're 100% right. All right. We're going to transition into phase 3 of the podcast, which is the hot seat. We just talked
What was
about it.
phase two?
Phase 2 was your lesson from sports. So we learned about you,
Okay.
lesson from sports. Now we go into the number 3, which is, look, if you don't evolve, you're going to be on the hot seat, right? Like we've all been there. We've feeling the numbers may not be where they need to be this month, and we're all driving to get there. This is a little bit different. Rapid fire questions. Give me the answer right off the top of your head. And,
Okay.
I tell people all the time, these are not pre-scripted, right? This is like, he doesn't know what's coming. So it's a little bit more fun. So
Okay.
first question, what time do you go to sleep on an average night?
It's inconsistent. So, maybe because I'm getting older, sometimes I get tired and it's like 10, 11 o'clock. That's kind of rare, more like midnight, 1 a.m. Sometimes I can go later on in the night if I really get on a roll, but probably 11:30-ish, I would say, if you had to average out all my time.
Average it out.
It's not
Okay.
healthy. It's very inconsistent.
What time do you wake up?
Every day by 6:30 or 6 o'clock, no matter what time I go to bed, because I've got 3 kids that will, they're the alarm, and a dog. My wife will send the dog. I have a German Shepherd, and she'll be like, "Wake him up," runs upstairs and jumps on me. So there's no,
No way.
yeah, 80-pound
Oh,
beast on, yeah. So
that's awesome. I love it. Great. All right. What's the best sponsorship story that you've encountered since starting Sponsor United? You guys interact with just some of the greatest, and I see you share a lot of amazing stories on your LinkedIn. But like, is there something that stands out to you of just like a turnaround for a team or a brand that has gotten into the space and just dominated, in the sponsorship landscape?
Not so. I'll answer it in 2 ways. Not really, because I think that we just look at such volume of business, and what I wake up and go to bed thinking about aren't necessarily like individual storylines of one brand and what they do. It's kind of like, how do we scale data? How do we make it more efficient? How do we solve the respective problems? And so I'm probably in a little bit of a different paradigm of like where I spend my time. I do think though that one that's generally interesting to me, and kind of trends to where we're going is I think what the primes and the Mr. Beasts have done, and how athletes, well, really athletes, entertainers have started to take control of creating their own brands,
Hmm.
promoting their own brands, leveraging their own IP. And I think I thought that was really interesting early on, how they were able to come in and kind of compete and do that against what are the largest companies in the world. And I see that as a trend that's probably not just going to continue, but with the advent of like social media platforms, I mean, there's more opportunity than ever for people to be able to, they can create their own packaging, their own websites, their own, like, everything can kind of be done in such more efficient ways now than ever before. And that really empowers the individual to probably be the brand or launch the brands in a way that you couldn't do 10, 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. It's removed a lot of the middlemen in a lot of industries, right? Where you have access to create your own everything, and you're no longer just letting people borrow your IP to drive brand. You're creating your own and controlling all of
And
it.
the audience, the consumer, because you are interacting directly with the consumer. And so what Mr. Beast knows his audience is probably better
Hmm.
than most. And so, and what they respond to. And so
Yeah.
you're like a CMO, the product developer, and everything all in one, which is quite
Have
a
you ever gone back and watched on his YouTube? He does they show the progression of his of the why am I blanking on the word? Just the cover art on a video. I'll send it to
No,
you.
I saw his first video though that he ever did, the
Yeah,
video game one, but no.
it's pretty wild because they change it like every like 7 minutes or so. They change it to see which one got the better reaction, and then they lean into it. And there's like a couple of videos that have tracked it just to see his thought process of learning what the audience is going to do and what they're going to react to, and like what change in the thumbnail is going to drive the most impressions. It's amazing.
Well, I
Anyways,
think in general, like, that's where, I mean, brands have a real opportunity. I think you're starting to see it where it's like, look, I can go into the college basketball space, quickly enter the space, do things with, 5 athletes, A/B test those, tweak those content pieces. So the feedback loops and the speed of getting that for brands now is just so much different than if I wanted to get in college basketball 10 years ago and what
yeah.
that would look like.
No doubt. And what you were trying to get from it, right? Like
Mhm.
you were, awareness before. Now you can actually drive and convert people right from those assets. Okay. Separate of the job you have right now, what was your favorite job you ever had?
Cutting grass at a cemetery. That was a great gig. That I mean, bounced at a bar on the water in college too, the Crab Shell. That was fun. I just sat there. No one ever had a fight, so I never had to throw anybody out. I just sat on a stool, hanging out, listening to tunes, watching people. But I think the cemetery wins because I used to just go. I'd listen to music or Howard Stern and just go cruising on a mower all day long. And I love the fact that, in that type of job, you could literally see like, I could see, I like that. You can see the work you've done and completed. So that was a great gig.
I
Lakeview
knew you were gonna
Cemetery.
I knew you were gonna have a great answer for that one. I didn't know what it was gonna be, but I knew it was gonna be fun. Um, we talked about your dad. What was the best advice your dad ever gave you?
That's a tough one because I got a lot of advice. He was always
Hmm.
telling me his opinion. I think it was actually one that was from his father. And my brother has this sign up that my grandfather, who was in World War One, he was born in 1891,
Wow.
had. He was a chief of detectives. It says, "Live each day that you can look any man in the eye and tell him to go to hell." So I kind of a little aggressive, but I like it's a little bit of confidence of, like, whoever you are, like, you treat everybody the same. So
Yeah, I
yeah.
like that. I like that. Um, what's been the best part of owning your own business?
Creative freedom, I think, is one. The ability to dream and actually put dreams into reality. I think that and the gift of patience and just, knowing that there's just so many challenges, and it's taught me a lot of how to deal with stress and deal with time management and learn how to prioritize and what really matters. So those sorts of things I enjoy. Plus, I like the freedom of just my day, to be able to kind of not be in such a structured environment as well. So it's wired well for me.
Yeah. Best show you've ever binge watched?
Oh man, there's like two or three, and I'm not good at when you put me on spots of like stuff like that. 'Cause
I'm doing this.
I'm like the kid who's 16 who goes to his first dance and he walks up to the girl, and I'm like, I don't know where'd my brain go. I can't think of it. I mean, I could say Seinfeld because I referenced it the other day, but I didn't binge watch it. I just used to
Yeah.
watch it regularly. Oh man, I don't know. Those are one of those things you're gonna have to edit in all over the place. Oh
We can
man,
come back to it. We
my
can come
brain
back to it.
doesn't work. Can't think of it.
Here's an easier one. What's your favorite drink to sip on at night?
It's changed over time.
Yeah.
I like Cabernet wine. It's
Interesting.
nice. Yeah,
Okay.
it's changed over.
You were a brown drink guy for a little bit. You loved like those one ice cube sipping on like a whiskey or a scotch.
That was like rare too. I never was like I'm not.
Okay.
No, I had a lot of friends that do that, but not
Okay.
really. That was maybe every
You
time
just
I
like
saw you, I was. But no, I'm not a brown drink guy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Got it. I always had that. Maybe it was because when you did your Mad
Take a
Men
photo of
office.
you. I always have one.
Well, when you created you took all the aspects of Mad Men. Remember when you did that?
Yeah.
So
I like
always
the
had that drink.
idea of like being a whiskey drinker, but I actually
Yes.
don't like the taste of it that much.
That's hilarious. Me either.
Yeah, it looks cool, so I like that.
Yeah. Okay. I always had that visual of you, but yeah, that makes even more
Yeah, I'm
sense.
a wimp. I'm a wimp with that stuff.
All right, two more. Favorite place to vacation?
Oh, gosh. So I like just staying home and hanging out, but but we go to Florida to vacation.
Okay.
But I don't like getting on planes. I don't like schlepping somewhere with the masses. So anywhere that the opposite of where everybody else is going. I just like going for a ride. I'm a pretty simple person.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it.
Plus these
And then
days I'm like a glorified like babysitter,
yeah,
or camp counselor during my vacations. So it's a little
yeah.
bit different.
As my wife says, we don't go on vacation. We're just watching our kids somewhere else. It's
Yeah,
just a new environment to watch them run
it's
around.
amazing, but it's definitely
Yeah,
different than traditional vacation in my
no
mind.
doubt. No doubt. All right, last thing. What's the first thing you do in the morning after
Um,
the dog jumps on you?
I weigh myself.
Do you really?
Yep. I weigh myself. That's the first thing I do. And then I have a coffee.
Wow, I like it. I like it.
Gotta keep this svelte body in.
You got to keep yourself honest. Yeah.
Exactly.
I like it.
Exactly.
I like it. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Last segment, which is all about providing value. So we've tried to do that throughout the whole episode. This is just a very, kind of locking in on just some specific questions that I love to share with people to give them some value. When we were coming up, I didn't feel like there were a lot of places to go to get information from people who thought the way I thought. There weren't access to wacky creative people like all over the world. And now because you can, right? And so that's part of what I try to do with this. And so what advice would you give somebody who wanted wanted to work in sales? You did so well in that industry. You crushed it as a salesperson, as a sales manager, as a sales leader, thinker. Somebody who said, you know what, Bob, I want to get into the sales world. What should I do?
Yeah, I think, well, the easiest thing is to try to seek out mentors, obviously, and just people that you can talk to. But there's all different types of sales too. And that's the other thing. Like how you're wired might be very good for certain industries and sales and not for others. There's high volume, there's long sales cycles. I think the best advice if I was starting today is like there's just so much research at your fingertips. So number one, like sign up for Chat GPT and literally use it to ask questions all day. Like it's amazing. It could be like, I'm this. How do I go into that? It's literally opening up to every article ever written, etc. So I think I just think there's so many applications there. I think I think to start, you've got to be naturally interested in other people and other industries and asking good questions too. So I think it's important to read every day. I think it's important to read, the Wall Street Journal. And again, depending on what you want to sell, but I think like
Sure.
you have to naturally be interested in others in order to be good at sales, because you're, at the end of the day, you're creating a solution for them based on what they're saying. And so a great architect can't be great if they don't have good blueprints and they don't have good idea of what needs to be built. And so that's the most important thing. Great architects, great designers, and you know this in your world, have to be great at asking questions and understanding the other person. So getting good at that, I think, is really important as a foundation for anything that you do.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great one, and you're exactly right. We used to joke with my designers that if they didn't like the feedback coming from the higher ups, that they could get a canvas and an easel and go stand on a pier and paint the sunsets as much as they want. But our job is to listen, hear, and create based around the direction that somebody is giving us. And we can always give our feedback, but the goal is to make it a reality for them. And
Yeah,
so, yeah.
everyone thinks sales is about like telling everybody else what they should do, what they should buy. But I think great salespeople are just great at asking questions. They're naturally curious about things and following up, like trying to understand stuff, trying to understand someone's problems, their objectives. And the more you do that, again, you're collecting all those dots. And then all of a sudden you can make sense of like, how can I help them based on this?
Somebody I know we both worked with, but like I say this all the time, like Bob McEwen, who's now at Clear Channel Outdoor. When I went on a sales call with him as a young kid, was the first time I got exposure to. He never actually sold anything.
Mm-hmm.
He just brought you an idea that he believed in, that he believed would help you. But if you didn't want to do it, that was okay too. And I was like, it was such a different approach. He had such confidence in the idea.
Mm-hmm.
So we would work on the idea and he'd be like, I love this idea. We're not selling these people. We're literally going to bring them a solution today that we believe in. And then we hope they do it because it makes a lot of sense. And everybody was like, it was just such a different direction to have that conversation of this point of confidence of I believe in this and I know my medium is the right one to do this for you. And my team will get it done. And it worked every time. I mean,
the more you like, when you're sitting across from somebody, they're living in their world, trying to solve their problems. The amazing thing about being in sales is you can go out and talk to 500 other individuals in those industries and learn from all of them. So when you sit with that person, you have all this information that they don't spend their time having, they don't have the time to learn from. Then you can start to deliver solutions to them. That's what gives you the conviction and confidence that, hey, based on what I see everywhere else, this is probably more likely to be helpful to you. And I think that's really powerful.
All right, last two. Would you change anything about your career?
It's hard to, everything happens for a reason. It's like a game of Plinko. It's like, what you don't know where that takes you. Who knows?
Right.
It's Back to the Future. Change one little thing, all of a sudden people get eliminated. So I don't know. I don't. If I didn't work in radio, I wouldn't have met my wife because the president of was iHeart in New York. I met her through going out to the Hamptons with him one weekend randomly.
Wow.
So everything kind of, I guess, happens for a reason. Hard to change the past. I try not to focus on that.
All right, last one. I always try to finish on a positive. You know that about me. What's the best part about what you get to do every day?
I get to take on really hard problems, or try to take on really hard problems that don't have necessarily clear answers, and learn and iterate and try different things and learn from different environments to try to solve those problems. So it's like a big, I always like puzzles and Legos and all those things. And so I get to do that every day, which is fun. It's taking on hard challenges and figuring out how to solve them. That's the best.
That's a great answer. And it's what I know what drives you when you were 22 years old all the way to today. And it's amazing to see your friends that you can start to see the things that motivate them and get them up. And all of us who have found our way to get to do what we do, we all do different things, but it is, especially like our tight group of friends that we've all been together for so long, seeing each one of them kind of find their niche and you're like, yeah, that's exactly what you should be doing. And it's pretty amazing.
We're lucky to be surrounded by a lot of like really inspiring people like yourself and others in our network that I think, everyone has hard days and sometimes hard points in their career. And when you have a network of great people around you that can inspire you or you can look up to or learn from, I just think there's such value in, going back to like, what would you do to be successful? I think it's how you develop great networks, great relationships with people that you can learn from and then provide value to them as well. And seeing everybody else succeed is one of the best things, in my career.
You and I have both gone through this where, we've worked for people who later you and I have been on the phone giving advice in the other direction, which is like a really weird twist of the turns, because you get to a certain point where you've all done really cool things. And there are moments where we've all needed to be picked up, right? We've all had a bad day, and that you have that group. And sometimes you turn into that group just for a laugh, and it's like, today was brutal. Like, I need a good laugh. This crew will get me back on track, and, or picking up the phone and saying, hey, you got to help me talk through this thing. And then you're right. That network that you create, and we were fortunate to get it at such a young age, to have it for as long as we've had that network of people is pretty special. And honestly, like, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're super busy, but coming on here and sharing with me, but sharing with everybody all that you've done in your career, and all your great lessons. And congrats on everything you've built. I know you're not even close to finish, and nobody likes to be congratulated in the middle, but as your friend, congrats, dude. You went after it. You risked it all. What you've created is not only cool to like your friends, like that's pretty cool, but like in the industry, for me to like go into teams and have them talking about this, not realizing that we've been friends for so long. I'm like, no, I know Bob. Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, sure. Everybody knows Bob. I'm like, no, we were in a cubicle next to each other at 20, but I'm really proud of you, dude. Congrats on everything. And thanks so much.
I appreciate it. Well, thanks for doing this. This is cool that you pass this knowledge on to everybody. Very cool.
That's what it's all about, buddy.